Today we are looking at a Super Reverb from a friend of mine. This was purchased and shipped and damaged in shipping. Amplifier works fine, but you can see here that there's some splitting going on in the wood, and the amplifier is basically crunching down into the cabinet because it was dropped on its feet. So I'm going to take this apart, get the Tolex removed here on the corners and see what we can do. We may be able to save this cabinet with just some woodworking stuff, but we may have to build a new cabinet, and we're definitely going to have to redo the Tolex on 3 of the sides, so stay tuned. Okay, so I've got the amplifier removed and Tolex pulled back from the corners, and we can see that this is a plywood construction here. This is a reissue Fender, so a little bit different materials than the original stuff. And right here you can see where it's split, and it's in between the plies of wood. I think if we glue and clamp this and maybe shoot a few brad nails into it, we can salvage this cabinet and not have to build a new one, which would be, cost prohibitive for the client. So we'll just glue this one back together and recover it with new Tolex. So I'll go ahead and pull all the Tolex off of this, remove the speaker baffle, sand off any excess glue, and then we will glue and clamp the top piece back together. And you can really see that crack going all the way back here. Let that set up for a couple days, and then we'll cover it with new Tolex and put it all back together. Oh, I guess there's an opportunity here for the client. If they wanted to change color on the Tolex, they could, but I'm guessing they won't want to. Just in case you wanted to get a look inside one of these Fender reissues, we have a printed circuit board for the controls, which is kind of disappointing. So that means, the knobs are not easily accessible, and they're hard to clean because they're underneath this PCB board. And likewise, the input and output jacks are wired or soldered directly to the screen board, so that does make them a little more fragile and prone to breaking. So that's a little disappointing. And then we're using a different kind of circuit board here, still not hand wired, but a little more room at least in here to play around with components, and things are a little easier to see within this setup. Everything's on the top, so there's none of the circuitry's underneath, which is helpful. Still using a rectifier tube, which is great. And then we've got some very small gauge wire going on here for our filament circuit, which is a little disappointing. But things are nicely twisted and raised to cut down on hum going on there. And someone has come in here and labeled the pin positions on these with a pencil, which is kind of fun to see that. What else is a little cool and weird? This speaker output is something I haven't seen before. They call it parallel outputs, where you have a single pin, 1/4 inch, so just the tip and the sleeve. And that's wired directly to a 3-pin tip, sleeve, and ground, so that you can plug into either one of these, doesn't matter, and it will create the correct ohm load on the output transformer. Normally you would have this grounded plug here in contact, and then have one of these ungrounded plugs over here labeled external speaker. But doing it this way, doing it in the reverse, allows you to plug into this one or this one, doesn't matter which one, or both. So that's kind of cool. Yep, everything else, no big surprises here. I'll go ahead and pull off the doghouse and take a look at the electrolytics to see what they're using these days. This is a, let's see, copyright 2000, but I don't know exactly when this amplifier was made. Oh no! I see. Well, you might want to go ahead and change these while I've got this on the bench. Depending on when these were manufactured, they may be total garbage, or they might be okay. So probably a good idea to just swap them out for some stuff that we know is good, rather than having to figure out when IC got their act together and stopped making crappy capacitors. It would be a real drag to get this cabinet all put back together and send this amp back to the customer and then have problems with the electrolytics startup. So we'll change all of those out, and I'll test there's no reason why these resistors would be bad, but I'll test them anyway. This amplifier has very little hours on it right now. So if we want to make sure it's going to last a good long time, I'll go ahead and change these out. I did find a date here of assembly 5/16/01 by SPSR. So that definitely puts those filter capacitors in the danger zone. So we really do need to swap them out. All right, got the Tolex off of this guy, and a rough sanding, just like some 120 to knock down some of this glue. It looks like Fender has been using brads in here in their assembly. Not that they're particularly effective in this case, but they are using brads on the corners. And so I'm going to go ahead and refill these corners with glue, clamp them with these pipe clamps, and hopefully get a functional box out of this. All right, got all the Tolex off of here, and I've glued up the cabinet. The seams came back together very nicely. I did go ahead and sink some screws in just to reinforce the stability here. Things are very tight now, so I'm happy with that. And then I've just got wood filler in here that I'm going to sand back before I apply the Tolex. But you can see there's still a tiny bit of a split here, but hardly noticeable. And once the Tolex is on there, it should be good as new. All right, guys, before we get started on the Tolexing, let me kind of go over all the tools you're going to need to do it. The old Tolex should peel off by hand pretty easy. If it doesn't, then you might need a scraper, or you might need to just heat it up. Heat gun would be recommended for that purpose. Once you get all of the old Tolex off, I typically do a fairly light sanding with some 120 grit sandpaper. We don't want it to be too smooth or the glue will have trouble sticking, okay? Then if there's any cracks or surface blemishes that need filling, go ahead and use plastic wood. It doesn't matter what color you use if you're gonna Tolex over it, but I'd like to keep some natural or pine color around in case I have a nice pine box and the customer wants to actually stain it. So it's always good to have matching color. Tight bond for any gaps or anything that needs to be glued back together. This Tolex that I'm using is a Fender copy sold by Mojo Tone. So nothing special. You should be able to get this kind of Fender Tolex pretty much anywhere. Aluminum tape. This is a 3M product for ductwork. It's, you know, sticky on one side and then aluminum on the other. Comes out looking like this. And that's just for blocking radio waves from getting into your electronics. You're probably gonna need a few of these razor blades. True glue, this is also from Mojo Tone, but really any water-based adhesive will probably work fine. Make sure it's water-based. That'll make your cleanup a lot easier. And it's, you know, non-toxic, so you can get it on your fingers and wash it off and it won't hurt you. And it's very low fume, so you can do it indoors and it's not gonna drive you crazy. Foam brushes, don't use hair brushes. You're just asking to leave little bits of hair stuck underneath your Tolex everywhere. And then always good to have a scraper to help tuck in all the corners and edges. All right, let's get to Tolexing. All right, I've got my Tolex cut out here, 4 pieces. And got the heater on. It's a little chilly in the warehouse today, so don't want to wait forever for this glue to dry. So I've got the heater going here. I'm also going to warm up the cabinet a little bit to help with the drying. How did I get these sizes? Well, it's pretty simple. All you got to do is measure in from the edge on the top and bottom, 1.5 inches. Mark a line there, and we're going to measure from this line around the side of the cabinet down to the bottom line, and that will give us the size of this piece on the side, which we'll do the sides first. And then to get the dimensions for the wrap around, simply measure to the edge. If you have a tape measure, it's so much easier, like a cloth tape measure, to get the dimensions than using a straight tape measure. But the way I do it is I'll just measure this dimension here and then add 4 inches on either side. So that's plenty of wrap to come around this corner into this little socket here and then around these uprights, and then have a little bit left over to stick down on the inside of the cabinet here. So, and same measurement for the top and the bottom. I just make them all the same. So these ended up being 18 inches to go around and wrap. To measure the top and bottom pieces, we're gonna go from the interior here to the interior here, because we're gonna overlap. Okay, so we're gonna put the side piece on first, and then the top piece will overlap that, and it needs to just be the same size as this space between here and here. And for our case here with the Super Reverb, it was about 23.5 inches, 23 9/16, so just a 1/16 of an inch bigger. Cool, so now I'm gonna apply some glue and wait for it to get tacky, and then we'll start putting these pieces on. All right, waiting for the glue to dry. This is what we wanna see, nice and clear. It comes on pretty white, like this stuff. When it's dry, it's clear, but a little bit tacky. So these 2 center pieces are pretty much ready to go. These ones on the outside that are farthest from the heater, they're gonna need a little more time. Also, I went ahead and put a coat on the cabinet as well, and that is dry and ready for some more. I'm gonna do 2 coats on everything. Gotta do 2 coats. Make sure you cover everything well and that it's gonna hold, even in you know, bright sunlight. In order to cut these pieces, I just use a straight edge and razor blade. It works just fine. Scissors would probably work too, but then you might have lots of little, I don't know, dangly bits to deal with later. All right, moment of truth. We're gonna put on the first piece of Tolex. Got my top here and that line that I drew 1.5 inches in. Got my piece of Tolex here. I'm just gonna center it more or less on that line, and hopefully you can see what I'm doing pretty well. I'm just gonna get that on the line, some good even pressure on there, and then I'm gonna use I'm gonna pull down on the bottom a little bit while I'm smoothing the side down. I'm not really pulling all that hard. I don't want to stretch it out, but I do want it to adhere fully. So there we go. I'm just working from inside out, making sure I don't have any air bubbles trapped in there. That looks pretty good. Got a little line in the center here from where it was folded. Once this gets warm, that should go away. So there's that. Okay, I'll just bring this up so I can get this seam down nice and tight around that corner. And in pretty good shape there. Right along the line that I drew down here. I don't know if you can see, but it's a little below on this side and a little above on that side. So I could unwrap this and wrap it again, pulling a little more to this side. But since this is on the bottom, I'm just gonna leave it. No one's probably ever gonna notice that. Okay, now we're gonna use a razor blade to clean up the sides. So I'll turn this on its side here. Make sure I can see it in the camera. Let's back this up just a little bit. Or maybe I'll bring you in here. Yeah, so you can kind of see what I'm doing. Okay, awesome. Okay, first thing to do is to bring this over the edge. Make sure we have good smooth contact all the way down there. And at the top. Cut this back in a straight line along the edge. Being careful to stop before I reach the edge just a little bit, leave a little extra, then fold that down. This one's a little trickier, this edge over here, because it is, it's the top of the cabinet where it's angled because it's a black face. So what I'm doing here is I'm just pulling this tight that way and then pulling it tight down here on the angled piece to make sure I have good contact. And then once I've got good contact, I can make this straight cut here. Being careful to stop just a little bit before, maybe 1/8 of an inch before I reach the edge, and then fold it over. Okay, there we go, that looks pretty good. Okay, so now I need to make a cut. There, that looks good. Right here where the angled front and the side meets. Just like that. And then this will get folded down. And this guy over the top. And now, fold this in kind of on top of itself and squeeze it down into this channel until it reaches the rails. Like that. And this is where it's handy to have a little scraper. Kind of force this down into the seam. Okay, just like that. Okay. And then a little pressure on the rail. We can fold this over the top. A little pressure there. Nice. That all looks groovy. And then fold it over the back side. Can't really see me doing it, but I'm just pulling it up onto the back side here. And it looks like that 18 inches for the original cut was pretty dang good. It's just folding over the rail on the back end. And so that's great. Okay, so we've got these two overlapping pieces here that we need to deal with. The first thing to do is to cut this angled piece along that rail, that upright rail, because we don't need that there. There we go, like that. And then I'm gonna peel this back and remove some of this extra material. Just cut straight back here, like that. There we go. Awesome. There it goes. Nice. Okay, there's that. Make that nice and tight. Okay, I'll cut off this excess here. Hopefully you can see all of that. And then I'm just going to make a straight cut down on the inside here. That should be plenty of material going down in there. And originally Fender glued it down and then stapled it. But if you do a good enough glue job, you shouldn't have to staple this as well. Okay, now we'll just bring this back in, like so. Excellent. There. All right, that's pretty good. We have a little bit of overlap here still. So what I'm going to do is I will just cut both of these at the same time, like that. This little piece come off there, and then I can peel this back one more time and remove that little excess piece underneath. There it goes, like that. And fold this down smooth, and there should be a good seam right there. Nice. Okay, there we go. Excellent. All right, there's that side. I'm gonna go ahead and do the corners here. So let me set up that shot. Okay, now I'm gonna show you how to do a corner. This is still the front that we're working on. This is how I left it. Remember, we had this cut coming back in this way. So now I'm going to very carefully pull this down. I'm being extra careful of this corner. I don't want to tear back into the Tolex. So I'm just pulling this straight down like that, and I'll fold it over itself a little bit. Okay, grab my razor blade. We're gonna make a cut from this corner at a 45-degree angle and exiting here, right where the Tolex meets the wood. There's a little bit of a bubble here in the corner where things are kind of folded over themselves, and I want to cut from the very edge of that bubble. So I'll kind of work this over until I get just, there we go, sort of a tight edge there. And I will cut from that edge across like that. I'll pull this back as far as that cut went, and then I'm going to fold this back over the top again. And I want it to lay down as flat as possible. So you'll notice that when I lay it back down, it's kind of gone like this just a little bit, and that's okay. That's going to help me to get rid of this little pocket of extra material right there. Okay. Oops, sorry, I bumped the camera. All right, now that I've got that laid down, I'm going to make a cut straight across here. I want to be like in the center of this radius where it's transitioning from bottom to front, okay? Right across. And I'm cutting through 2 layers of material, so I'll need to press a little extra hard in order to do that. Here we go. There we go. And get right into the corner. There it is. Okay, so then I'll peel this back and remove this section from underneath that I just cut away. There it goes. Cool. And then lay this back over the front. And I'm just making sure that I work that seam together with my thumb so that it's indistinguishable. Now we'll make a cut down, continuing this line. There we go. And then because that angle happened, I'll just need to cut this back a little bit. And I've got a little bit of extra material here in the corner that I can deal with here in a second. There we go. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of smush on this a little. See how much extra stuff I've got in here. Yeah, not that much. So the easiest way to deal with this is just to hit it with a heat gun for a couple of seconds. Very short amount of time. And then take a piece of scrap Tolex and just kind of use that to smush it down and get rid of that. So I'll go ahead and do all the corners first and then bust out the heat gun. Okay, I'm gonna show you how to do a corner. Corners are a little tricky. They take some practice for sure. So I'm just gonna pull this back very carefully. I don't wanna tear into this section. So as I'm pulling this back, I'm just being very careful to not over pull when I get to the corner. There we go. I'm gonna fold down from the top. Now, because this is the front of the black face, there's not going to be a metal corner here to hide any mistakes I make. So I want to make sure that this corner is as close to perfect as I can get it. So the first thing I'm going to do on this guy is cut straight across the top here. I want that to be basically halfway within this radius on the from transition from front to top. So we'll just cut from here across there. Looks pretty good. Now, oops, I bumped the camera a little bit. Sorry about that. Now I've cut all the way from where this folded over seam is. There's like a little bubble there that we're going to be working out of. I'll pull this back to the beginning of my cut. Again, I'm being really careful not to overstretch anything. So I don't want to tear in this way and I don't want to tear down that way. Okay, so then I'll go ahead and lay this back down over the top. And I'm going to make my downward cut starting from the top and coming down to there. Got that piece removed. And then I just need to make one more cut in the same place I made the first one going across this way. And this can be a little tricky. There we go. Sometimes you need to take a little more off. There. And then I'll peel this back because usually what I've done is I've cut a little tiny slice of this guy off too. And then we just work these together. And literally it's just smushing it together with your thumbs until the seam disappears. And then working on the corner to get that seam to disappear. Okay, you can see I've got a little bit of extra right here that I'll trim off. Like that. There we go. It's not the best corner I've ever done, but it's pretty good. And remember, we're going to put another piece on top that'll cover most of this here. So really, the perfect part of it is just this section right here in the corner. That has to look amazing. All right, we got the sides done. They look pretty good. Now we're going to do the top and the bottom. Because we're using this water-based glue, it's very easy if you get some on the Tolex to rub it off once it's dry. it just kind of balls up like rubber cement and comes off. So when we're applying the glue for the top and the bottom, don't worry if you over glue a little bit beyond where the Tolex is going to stick down, because we do need to put some glue on top of this Tolex. And if you go a little too far over, that's okay. Because like I said, once it dries, you can just work it with your fingers and get it up pretty easy. So I'll do 2 coats on the top and we'll put the piece on, and I'll show you how to cut that one to lay inside. And man, it's probably the easiest thing ever. Another thing I'll mention before you get too far along is to make sure you punch through any holes that you need to use for the amplifier assembly later. So for example, this is a tilt back cabinet and it has a couple of holes on the side for screws for the tilt back and for the leg. And so you just want to make sure that you punch those out so you're able to find them later. Otherwise it can be very tricky. So there's that one. And then speaker baffle also has some stuff that goes through this front rail. So I'll punch those out as well. Okay, time to put on the top piece. So my glue's all set up, dry, but still tacky. Basically the same technique that we did on the sides. I'm gonna center this in the cabinet. Now, because this is the front, it's got this notch back here. So I'm actually centering it with down. I'm kind of looking down here to find the center. So about here is where I'm going to center it. This has a bit of a fold in the middle, which is helping me to kind of guide that in here. Now the tricky part is I want to stick one corner and then roll it across without pulling or stretching or any of that stuff. It needs to be nice and smooth. So I'm going to start in the back, knowing that I want my center to be about there. I'll come back here, stick that corner, come around to the front. Actually, let's get a little bit more. There we go. Come around to the front. There, perfect. Okay, and now just work that across. Make sure I have good contact, good stick. Okay, now I'm gonna raise this up just a little bit after I pull this out of the way. I'm gonna make sure that this goes down nice and flat. And no air bubbles. There we go. Yeah, that looks good. And then the other side, I wanna make sure that it comes down far enough. Right now, let me see if I can see it in the shot here. Let me back this up, bring this down just a little bit. So right now, this side is too low and this side is a little high. Okay, so that means that as I brought this down, it kind of shifted like that a little bit. So all I need to do is pull this back up. It'll come away nice and easy now. And then shift a little more towards the back side as I bring this down. So as you can see, I'm using my right hand to pull towards the back. And then once I get down here, I can check to make sure I've got enough. And I'm gonna go ahead and flip this over so I can see what I'm doing a little better. Front looks good. The back you can see is still pretty gappy. So I'll pull this back over a little bit, like that, and just give it a little stretch, like that. There. Awesome. And good. That'll work. Okay. A little more smoothing on this. And then on its back. I want to make sure this is nice and tight, coming over this rounded edge here. So I'm giving it a little tug as I do this, smoothing over. There we go. And then just pull it down inside. I told you it was the easiest part. Way easier than the sides were. There we go. That looks pretty good. Let's flip it over and do the back. Okay. Looks good there. Now things are still a little gappy down here at the end. You can always pull back, give it a little tug, just a little stretch at the very end here. Get it to line up. Cool. Nice and tight. That looks great. Okay. We can do just a little bit of cleanup on the inside here. That looks really good. And then we'll do the bottom. All right, you guys, same technique on the bottom as the top. Line this up with the center. And then start on one corner. Bring it around to the other. Make sure that this is nice and stuck up here. Pull this out. Stick this guy. Make sure we get any air bubbles out. Alrighty. Nice. That's good. Back here. Pulling it tight. Okay, something a little bit different on this one is we've got the rails coming down. So I'm gonna need to deal with those guys. Basically what we're gonna do is cut back inside the rail till we get about a ½ inch from the edge, and then that'll just tuck down like that. And do the same on both sides. There we go. Cool. I'm pulling these guys tight. Get a nice sharp corner there. There we go. That. And then we'll just cut this one back ½ inch. Tuck it in. Cut this one back ½ inch. There we go. And tuck it in. Cool. That looks groovy. I'm gonna flip it over to the front. Same deal here. Oh, sounds like somebody's gonna practice now. just cutting this back to within about 3/4 of an inch on the front. That looks good. Make sure this is tight across here. Okay. Cut this guy back. Stopping at about 3/4. There we go. Make sure that edge is nice and sharp there. There we go. Cool. Now trim this piece back. 3/4 of an inch. Tuck it in. And then cut this guy back about 3/4 of an inch and tuck it in. All right, that's gonna do it for the Tolex. The only thing left is to just clean up all of this glue that I have, you know, over on the edges here, just by using my thumbs or whatever to kind of roll it off. And then after that, we will reassemble the cabinet. Oh yeah, I need to put some aluminum in the top up here. Fender puts a layer of aluminum to protect for radio waves and that sort of stuff. So I'll get a layer of aluminum in there too before we put it all back together. All right, so I replaced the filter capacitors in the doghouse. Got a nice set of F&Ts in here now. And then I did an audio test and discovered that one of the volume knobs was dirty. So I went ahead and just did a full tune-up on it, which was good. It needed that, actually. So I've lubricated and tightened all of the volume pots, tone pots, input and output jacks. And then I went ahead and pulled all the tubes and cleaned all the tube sockets. This tube, the indexing pin in the center had broken off, so I glued that back on. Went ahead and biased the amp. It was really close, but it was turned a little bit cool. So now we're back up to about 30 milliamps on each one of these guys. And then cleaned and tightened all the grounds on the inside as best as I could find. And so now we're ready to install this back into the freshly Tolexed cabinet. All right, got the Super Reverb all back together. You can see the Tolex turned out pretty nice here, where there was a big crack on the edge. Now it's all nice and fresh. And everything went back together pretty smoothly. The top of the cabinet is actually a little bit tighter since I clamped it than it was originally. So getting the amplifier in position was a little tight, but it went where it needed to go, and it's all bolted up. So we should be ready to rock here for a while. I just did a sound check on it, and it sounds amazing. So we're gonna send it back to the owner, and hopefully they'll get a lot of good years of service out of this.